She stood there, silent. The smell of bleach clung to her hands. The mop water was gray. Her back ached. She had been working for 8 hours without a break. Then it happened. A man in a navy blue suit, Brent Holloway, walked by with a clipboard in one hand and a smirk on his face. "Move faster. You think you're here to relax?" he snapped. She looked up. Her knees were wet from scrubbing tile. Then, without warning, he spat right at her feet. "Clean it up, or get out." He didn't know. He didn't know who she really was. He didn't know that the woman on her knees, wearing a $12 polyester uniform, owned the entire building, owned the company, owned him. That night, his phone rang. The number was from corporate headquarters. The voice on the other end, calm, stern, deadly. "Brent, tomorrow morning, you'll be meeting with the CEO. Don't be late." He had no idea. He'd already met her. This is the story of Victoria Lawson, a black woman who went from living in her car to building a billion-dollar company and going undercover in her own empire to uncover the truth. She thought she'd find broken systems. What she found was something much worse. Here's how it happened. It all started with a single review. Anonymous. 2 stars. Posted on Glassdoor. The words were simple, but sharp like razors. "If you're black, female, or human, stay out of Vantatech's Atlanta hub." Most CEOs would have ignored it, blamed it on a disgruntled temp, passed it to legal, let PR spin a response, and gone back to their executive retreat in Aspen. But Victoria Lawson wasn't most CEOs. At 43, she was a billionaire, founder of Vantatech Solutions, a logistics and automation company that had grown from her garage to a national empire with 32 distribution hubs and over 12,000 employees. She'd been raised on food stamps in East Detroit, slept in her car the year she graduated from Howard, wrote her first logistics algorithm on a cracked Dell laptop she rescued from a thrift bin. She knew struggle, she knew hard work, and she swore her company would be different, built with dignity, not just dollars. But over the last 6 months, something had shifted. At first it was whispers, a few complaints about poor managers. Then came the resignation letters, then the lawsuits, then the videos, grainy, filmed in secret. Workers crying, managers yelling, janitors being shoved aside like trash. She read everything, every memo, every thread, every internal Slack message that her legal team tried to bury. The hardest part, realizing this wasn't just a bad apple problem. This was rot. The kind of rot that grows when power is unchecked, when executives are too far from the floor, when people stop being seen as people and start being seen as numbers. Victoria Lawson decided she needed to see it for herself. No boardroom, no cameras, no name tag that said CEO. So one Friday night, she vanished. She walked into her private penthouse, pulled her hair into a bun, and chopped it off. She dyed it flat black. No highlights, no style, just plain. She removed the Cartier bracelet her mother gave her after her first $1 million contract, tucked it in a drawer, took off the pearl earrings, wiped away the last trace of foundation. She created a new resume. Name, Renee Jackson. Age, 39. Background, 2 kids. Former office admin. Currently unemployed after a warehouse layoff. Every detail was built to blend in, to be overlooked. Her credentials were scrubbed, her LinkedIn wiped, her digital trail erased. She applied to her own company through a third-party staffing agency. No one suspected a thing. 3 days later, she got a call. "Hi, Renee. We've got an overnight janitorial shift available at Vantatech's Atlanta hub. You want it?" She said yes. And just like that, one of the most powerful women in America walked through the doors of her own company. Not as a boss, but as a nobody. No boardroom, no driver, no assistant, just a cheap badge that barely stuck to her hoodie and a mop. What she was about to witness in that warehouse would haunt her, anger her, and ultimately ignite a fire that would burn through her entire corporate structure. Because this wasn't just about one bad manager. This was about what happens when power forgets where it came from. The sun hadn't risen yet. The sky was still bruised with blue-gray clouds when Renee Jackson stepped off the 5:15 a.m. bus and stood before the front gates of Vantateca's Atlanta distribution hub. It was a massive structure, nearly 500,000 square feet of steel, glass, and silence. To most people passing by, it looked like just another corporate warehouse. But to her, it was personal. This place had her fingerprints in its foundation. She helped design the floor plans, approved every blueprint. She knew where the fire exits were before anyone else ever walked inside. And yet today, she wasn't walking in as a founder, not as a board member, not even as a guest. Today, she was just another temp, another file in the staffing agency's system, a name on a spreadsheet assigned to janitorial support, Zone 4. The security guard didn't look up when she walked past. No one said good morning. No one smiled. At the front desk, she handed over her fake ID badge. The woman behind the glass slid a clipboard toward her without speaking. One page. No welcome. No protocol. Mop rooms in the back. You are Zone 4. Clock in before 6 o'clock or lose half your pay. Renee followed the painted yellow line through the hallways. The deeper she went, the colder it got. Walls were bare. Lights flickered. One woman limped past her carrying boxes too heavy for one person. No music, no break room chatter, just the hum of machines and the occasional bark of a supervisor. And then she met him. Brent Holloway, team lead, supervisor, tyrant. He looked like he'd been promoted for staying late, not for being competent. "Who are you?" he snapped, without looking up from his tablet. "Renee, janitorial support. Mop closets over there. Grab what you need. Don't break anything. And stay the hell out of Zone 1. That's executive loading. You don't belong there." He didn't ask her name again. He didn't ask if she'd been trained. He didn't care. She started work immediately. No gloves. No boots. No checklist. First task. Scrub the receiving bathroom. The one with broken pipes and graffiti on the stall. By 9 a.m., her knees were soaked. Her arms ached. Her back was sore. The warehouse wasn't just disorganized. It was dehumanizing. Workers timed each other with stopwatches. Laughter was punished. Phones were banned. At break time, she found a quiet corner to eat a protein bar. A young woman named Mirabelle leaned over and whispered, "You new? Don't speak too much." Last girl who talked back got fired by lunch. Another worker, Reggie, a man in his 50s with tired eyes and taped-up boots, added, "They don't see us. We're numbers. If your badge stops scanning, you stop existing." Victoria listened. She observed. And the more she watched, the more disgusted she became. Supervisors joked openly about firing people just to keep them nervous. One manager accused a single mom of faking her daughter's illness, then cut her hours. And Brent watched her closely, looking for cracks. He laughed when she slipped on a wet floor, didn't offer a hand, just walked away. "Move faster. You want a permanent spot here. Or what? You lucky we even called you." She'd heard this tone before, years ago, from landlords who didn't want to rent to her, from investors who thought she was too young or too urban for leadership. But now, she was hearing it in her own house. This wasn't a rogue manager. This was a culture, one she didn't know existed. She didn't tell anyone who she was. Not yet. She needed to see more, feel more, know it down to her bones. The other workers warned her, "Keep your head down, or you will be next." But Victoria Lawson wasn't built to stay silent. Before the money, before the boardrooms, before the headlines, there was a little girl in Detroit, sitting on the cracked floor of a studio apartment, watching her mother stitch holes in a uniform she didn't even get paid minimum wage to wear. Her name was Victoria Elise Lawson, born to a teenage mother, no father listed. Her crib was a dresser drawer. Her lullabies were sirens and the rumble of buses outside the window. They didn't have much, but they had rules. Say thank you. Work hard. Never let anyone tell you what you're worth. At 14, Victoria got her first job, cleaning offices after school. At 16, she was running the night shift at a diner. By 17, she had read every book the library had on logistics, supply chains, and operations management. She applied to 22 colleges, got rejected by 17, waitlisted by 4, accepted by Howard University on a partial scholarship. She took the bus to D.C. with a duffel bag, $80 in cash, and a fake leather planner from Walgreens. Her dorm roommate called her ghetto. Her professors called her ambitious, but not leadership material. She didn't correct them. She just kept showing up. She worked night shifts in a hospital, cleaned labs, and slept between textbooks in the campus library. She drank instant coffee, wore the same 3 outfits on rotation, sent half her work-study paycheck back to her mom. And still, she was the only black woman in her graduating class to major in supply chain analytics. When she applied for internships, they told her resume was too aggressive. When she showed up for interviews, they asked if she was lost. "You speak so well. Are you here for the admin job? We're not sure you'd be a cultural fit." She smiled through every insult, nodded through every dismissal. And the day she got her first offer, it wasn't from a Fortune 500 company. It was from a small delivery startup that couldn't afford to pay her, but offered one thing no one else had: a chance. Victoria built her first logistics algorithm in the corner of that dusty office, using a broken desktop and outdated Excel sheets. 6 months later, she had tripled the company's output. 12 months later, she had enough savings to file her first business license. Vantatech Solutions, LLC. They said she was too soft-spoken to lead. So she built an empire, in silence. Every warehouse, every employee, every piece of code she approved was her answer to a world that refused to see her. And now, decades later, here she was, back on a factory floor, back in the silence. But this time, she wasn't the one who would be overlooked. By day 3, Renee stopped wondering if what she was seeing was just a few bad apples. Because by day 3, it was undeniable. This wasn't dysfunction. This was design. In every department she entered, a pattern emerged. A dark, deliberate pattern. The white temps, assigned to air-conditioned inventory zones, or light sorting detail. The black and Latino workers. Bathrooms, trash lines, heat-drenched conveyor belts with no fans and no airflow. No rotation. No exceptions. She watched a black man named Luis Alvarez nearly pass out while hauling chemical drums. When he asked to take 5 minutes to cool down, the supervisor yelled, "If you're too soft for this work, go flip burgers." When a white temp arrived late, he was laughed at, welcomed, and sent to Training B. When a Latina woman named Carmen asked for help lifting a crate, she was ignored, then written up for dropping it. She knew the numbers, knew the laws, knew what equal opportunity was supposed to look like. But hey, inside her company, equity was just a poster in the break room, a forgotten promise, curling off the wall like peeling paint. And then, there were the women. She noticed it the second she entered Zone 6, shipping and loading. Whispers when women walked past. Hands lingering too long. Comments like, "You wearing that for me? Smile a little, baby, might get a raise." At first, she thought it was isolated. A few disgusting men. But then she watched a girl, maybe 19, get backed into a supply cage by 2 team leads. One laughed. One blocked the exit. No one intervened. She clenched her fists, walked away before she blew her cover, and whispered into the small MIC sewn into her jacket seam. "Log this. Zone 6. Noon. Potential harassment escalation." She had 5 hidden cameras on her. One in her pen, one in her duffel bag, one in the corner of her ID badge. All recording. The footage was horrifying. But the audio was worse. Supervisors joking about which new temps were ripe. One openly saying, "HR won't do a thing unless she's got bruises and a lawyer." HR, the same department that sent out cheery emails during Women's History Month. The same one that called her, months ago, and assured her, "We're proud of our inclusive work culture, Ms. Lawson." She had been lied to, not just by her staff, but by her system. A system that wore her name on every wall, but had no reflection of her values inside. She went home that night and didn't sleep. Instead, she watched the footage. Every clip, every frame. Every slay, every smack, every terrified silence. By 4 a.m., she had her face in her hands. Her stomach was turning, because what she saw in the footage made her physically sick. By the end of Hayes' second week, Victoria Lawson had seen enough to fill an entire investigation file. But there was still one piece missing. She had witnessed the cruelty, felt the disrespect, loved the abuse. But now, she was about to experience it firsthand. Friday morning, 7:42 a.m., all warehouse zones were pulled into a mandatory team briefing, a rare occurrence. The whiteboard was covered with red excess and warnings. Missed quotas, high turnover, low productivity. The air was thick with frustration. Workers shifted in their boots, avoiding eye contact. At the center of it all stood Regional Manager Alan Davis, a man whose handshake was colder than steel and who saw every worker as a liability, not a human being. If you all don't want to be here, you don't have to be. We've got resumes stacked this high. The board's breathing down my neck, and I'm not about to lose my bonus because you people can't do basic math. Then he asked the question no one expected. Ideas. Anyone got a better way to streamline floor 2? No? Thought so. And then, Victoria, still wearing the name Renee, raised her hand. She spoke clearly, professionally, laid out a simple rerouting system to reduce cart backflow by 11%. Mentioned it had worked in 5 other hubs. Cited data. Kept it brief. The room froze. Oh, wow. We got a Harvard girl in here. You been here, what, 10 days? And you think you know more than my team leads. Then he walked closer, looked her dead in the eye, and said the words she would never forget. You're not executive material. Hell, you barely look employable. The room fell still. No one spoke. No one defended her. Even Brent looked down. Reggie clenched his jaw. Maribel's eyes welled up, but she turned away. Victoria didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't explain who she was. She just nodded once, picked up her gloves, and walked out. She made it to the break room, sat down at the far corner table, buried her face in her hands, and for the first time in years, she cried, not just from the insult, but because she realized this was what her employees were enduring. This was the silence they swallowed. This was what her name had become. But pain was never the end of her story. That night, she didn't write a resignation. She didn't call HR. She uploaded every file, cross-referenced every clip, wrote one email, not to human resources, but to legal. Monday morning, 9:15 a.m., Conference Room A, Vantatech Corporate Headquarters, downtown Atlanta. The meeting was urgent. Called at 2 a.m. by the board. No details given. Just one directive. All regional managers must be present, in person. They showed up confused. Brent Holloway, still arrogant. Alan Davis, irritated, tie loose, coffee in hand. Others whispered theories. Layoffs. A merger. Another PR leak. They didn't know. They were the leak. The doors opened, and she walked in. No mop, no name badge, no gray hoodie. She wore black, a tailored suit, and silence. Victoria Lawson took her seat at the head of the table. The room didn't breathe. A few jaws dropped. Brent stared like he'd seen a ghost. And Alan Davis, the man who told her she didn't look employable, dropped his coffee. She looked at them, calm, no anger, no theatrics, just truth. Hello, my name's not Renee. It's Victoria Lawson. I own this building. I built this company from scratch, and I just spent 2 weeks living in your nightmare. Silence. You could hear hearts drop. Brent went pale. Davis reached for his tablet, like data could save him now. She slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside, transcripts, photos, video footage. 5 pages of HR violations. Harassment logs. Time-stamped audio. Names. Faces. Every insult recorded. The evidence didn't just speak. It screamed. Maribel, Reggie, Carmen. Every story finally had a witness who couldn't be ignored. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She simply said, "This is not who we are, but this is what we've become. And it ends today." One by one, managers were asked to leave the room. But that wasn't the end. That was just the ripple. Because the real storm hadn't even started. When Victoria Lawson left that boardroom, the temperature inside Vantatech dropped 20 degrees. No one raised their voice. No one tried to defend themselves. They just sat there, frozen. Because the truth wasn't just spoken. It had been documented. The first to fall was Alan Davis, the same man who mocked her in front of the team. The man who spat insults like gum wrappers on a warehouse floor. Fired. On the spot. Security escorted him out of HQ by 11 a.m. No ceremony. No silence. Just a box, a badge, and a legacy of failure. He didn't even get to clean out his desk. By midday, Vantatech's entire Atlanta HR team had been placed on administrative leave. Victoria's executive assistant began making calls, quietly, urgently. The HR audit was immediate. Every file, every timestamp, every ignored complaint. Nothing was safe. By 3 p.m., an emergency compliance team was dispatched to the site. Independent, outside of internal politics. Their mission, dismantle the silence. But while Victoria cleaned house, the outside world was just starting to pay attention. It began with one clip. A grainy, 24-second video. Alan Davis on camera, sneering. "You're not executive material. You barely look employable." It hit Twitter by 4:17 p.m. By 6 o'clock, it had over 3.2 million views. NBC Nightly News. A CEO goes undercover, and what she finds shocks the nation. CNN Primetime. Victoria Lawson just redefined leadership for a generation. Forbes. The mop in her hand wasn't for show. It was justice. Every platform, every feed, filled with her name, her story. People weren't just reposting her video. They were relating to it. Warehouse workers, nurses, teachers, fast food employees, all saying the same thing. She lived my story. It wasn't about mops or warehouses anymore. It was about being seen. The Vantatech stock dipped 11% within 48 hours. Shareholders panicked. Boardrooms buzzed. But the dip didn't last. Because by the end of the week, something incredible happened. Public trust came back. People didn't run from the company. They rallied around it. Not because it was perfect, but because it had a leader who refused to hide from imperfection. I'm switching to Vantatech out of respect. She did more in 2 weeks than most CEOs do in 10 years. That's how you lead, from the floor, not the clouds. Former employees reached out. Survivors of workplace abuse shared their voices. Community leaders offered partnerships. And suddenly, Vantatech wasn't just a logistics company. It was a symbol. And Victoria, she didn't give interviews. She didn't do victory laps. She went back to the floor, shook hands with the janitors, held meetings with night shift crews, ate lunch with the people who once felt invisible. Because she wasn't just cleaning floors. She was cleaning house. And just as the dust began to settle, as headlines faded and investors breathed again, someone appeared at her door, a face she hadn't seen since her undercover shift. And in their hand was a handwritten note that would change everything. Some leaders rebuild quietly. Others build from scratch. But Victoria Lawson did both. At the same time. In the days after her revelation, the headlines began to fade. The media trucks packed up. Investors stopped calling every hour. And for the first time in weeks, Victoria stood inside her office alone and asked herself the question that built her empire. Now what? The answer wasn't in PR campaigns. It wasn't in boardroom meetings. It was in the people, the workers, whose dignity had been taken and buried beneath quotas, write-ups, and silence. So she started with something radical. She showed up. Every Vantatech facility, from Atlanta to Omaha, from Dallas to Newark, received a message. Victoria Lawson will be visiting. No suits, no press, just conversation. The first town hall was standing room only. Employees didn't know what to expect. She walked in wearing a gray hoodie, the same kind she wore as Renee. Sat on a folding chair. No podium. No security. She told them everything. Why she went undercover. what she saw, what she felt. Then, she did something few executives ever do. She apologized, not for the system she inherited, but for the system she failed to notice. And the room went silent. Then it exploded in applause. 1 week later, changes began to appear, not in press releases, but in people's lives. Small black square hash a new head of HR was brought in, not from corporate, but from a non-profit that fought workplace discrimination. Small black square hash a new family leave policy was introduced, 12 weeks paid, including for hourly workers. Small black square hash anonymous reporting tools were launched, monitored by third parties, not Vantatech itself. Small black square hash, and for the first time in company history, mental health services were made available on-site. Mirabelle, who once whispered warnings over lunch breaks, now runs the new Employee Equity Council. Lewis, the man who nearly collapsed from heat stroke, now manages warehouse safety and speaks at every new hire orientation. Reggie, the quiet janitor with taped-up boots, was offered a retirement bonus and a choice: walk away or help lead the facilities redesign team. He chose to stay. "I want to help fix what hurt us," he said. And Victoria nodded. "That's exactly why I need you." She'd come into the warehouse to see what was broken, but what she found was a workforce that had never been truly seen. And then came the email from Harvard Business School, an invitation to speak at their Leadership and Ethics Symposium. The same institution that once questioned if she belonged in business was now asking her to teach the next generation how to lead. Asterisk, leadership isn't about being the smartest voice in the room. It's about hearing the quietest ones. We talk about climbing the ladder, but maybe the best leaders are the ones who know how to hold it still while someone else climbs. Asterisk, the auditorium didn't applaud at first. They stood. Back at Vantatech, her company felt different. Not perfect, but better. The kind of better you feel when the people who once whispered now speak freely, when no one has to hide their pain to keep their paycheck. She didn't do it for headlines. She didn't do it for profit. She did it because people deserve to be safe where they work. She leaned back in her chair one evening, looking out the glass windows of her corner office. And for the first time in a long time, she smiled. But just as she began to shut her laptop, there was a knock. She looked up, a silhouette outside the door, someone she hadn't seen since her days undercover. Asterisk, and in their hand was a letter that would change everything. Asterisk. The office was quiet. Just past 6 p.m. Most of the building had emptied, and for the first time all week, Victoria had a moment to herself. She had just closed her laptop when she heard it. A soft knock on the glass. She turned. A familiar silhouette stood in the hallway. It was James, a quiet janitor from her days undercover, the one who always showed up early, who shared his sandwich with new temps, who worked the night shift 7 days a week without ever complaining. He stepped in slowly, nervously, holding something in his hand, a folded piece of paper, stained at the edges, handwritten. He didn't speak much, just handed it to her, nodded once, and turned to leave. "Thank you for seeing us." That was all it said. No demands, no requests, just gratitude. But something about that note lingered. Later that night, Victoria looked him up, pulled his employee file. Then her jaw clenched. James A. Reynolds, bachelor's in mechanical engineering, former design technician, 7 years of spotless internal reviews. He had applied for a promotion 8 times and been denied every single time. Why? Because he spoke softly. Because he didn't have the look of a manager. Because someone once said, "He's more useful with a mop than a mouse." And so, for 8 years, a gifted engineer cleaned hallways. Because nobody ever looked twice. Until now. Victoria called him in the next morning. Not to interview. Not to explain. Just to tell him, "You're the new Senior Facilities Innovation Officer. Starting today." He didn't cry. He didn't shout. He just nodded and whispered, "I won't let you down." Victoria promoted him that day. Not because she owed him. Not because of the cameras. But because Victoria Lawson didn't just reclaim her company. She rewrote the rules. She proved that true leadership isn't about sitting at the top. It's about being willing to walk the floor, to scrub the corners no one else notices, to hear the voices no one else listens to remind the world that power means responsibility. She didn't go undercover to expose villains. She did it to find the truth. And when she did, she didn't bury it. So the next time you walk past someone scrubbing the floor, someone folding boxes, someone who looks like they've been forgotten, ask yourself, who are they really? Because behind every mop, every badge, every quiet smile could be a mind that's built empires, a heart that's carried generations, a soul the world tried to overlook. And when we choose to see people, everything begins to change. If this story moved you, hit subscribe. We have more to tell.